I think that there's a lot more to that part of the story than what's coming about. Because, like, you know, before this whole thing, I think there were kind of different spheres of, you know, possible Diddy scandals. There was these types of scandals, right? What's going on in the Diddy parties. I think that those were there. But there were a series of other rumors surrounding Diddy.
Welcome to the Hollywood Raw YouTube page, guys. We're happy to have you here. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave us comments, do all the stuff.
What are you waiting for? Let's go. I got a drug addiction to feed.
Welcome to the Hollywood Raw podcast. I'm Dax Holt. Over there is Adam Glyn. Today, we are taking a deep dive into Diddy's scandal. This has been obviously taking over the world for the last couple of weeks. Everyone wants to know more about Diddy. What's happening? Is this Kim Porter book true? Are all these celebrities actually connected to Diddy? Does he have sex tapes that he's hanging over their heads? Like, what is the story? So we're bringing on one of our good buddies who has been on a couple times now. He's the CEO and founder of MediaTakeOut, Fred Mwangaguhunga. Hopefully I said his name right. I feel like I butcher it every time. But he's a lawyer, and he has been covering Diddy for years and years and years. I know that they've actually spoken in the past. Listen, MediaTakeOut has been a huge website for many, many years. And I know that he's had conversations with Diddy. And so I want to get his perspective on all of this, you know, break down all these stories. This Kim Porter book is so alleged. Let me just say alleged Kim Porter book is so fascinating. And so I want to ask him some of those things, whether he believes it's true or not. So we'll get into that. Adam, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing well. I'm curious to talk to Fred because I have some questions. I just want to know that there's a lot of conspiracies, a lot of stories. I want to know the truth. I want to know what Diddy was actually into. So I want to get to Fred.
A little bit of everything, I would say.
Yeah, I want to get to Fred. Before we get to Fred, we read reviews. It helps us out with our helps us out on the charts. Dax, do you have a review ready for us?
Yes, this one is straight from Apple Podcasts. It is from Katie_34. She gave us a 5-star review. She said, "Love you guys." And then the review says, "Hi, just leaving a review and rating. Love this podcast and the Friday rundowns especially. Love your banter and makes me laugh out loud most episodes." And that is from Katie from Iowa with a little smiley face. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate you taking the time. You know we love these reviews. They help us out so much. So if you've got time, head on over to Apple Podcasts, find our show page, scroll down to the bottom, leave us a review. It's really for visibility for other people. We start popping up in their feeds. The more reviews you guys leave, they pop up in the feeds. It's just helpful for two podcasters who don't ask for any money. So we appreciate your guys' time, and it means a lot to us.
Yes. All right, Dax, tell us about our guest today.
Well, like I said earlier, our guest today, friend of the show, a buddy of ours who has been on quite a few times. We bring him on when the topics are heavy and we need all the details. He is the CEO. He is the founder of MediaTakeOut. Fred, welcome back to Hollywood Raw. Fred, thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you on, as we always are. You are one of our good buddies that we've had on numerous times. You are the expert in the field. And so, you know, we wanted to break down this whole Diddy situation. By the way, I need to make sure that I say your name properly. I waited for you to come on so I could make sure I say it, because I screw it up every time. Fred Mwangaguhunga. Did I say it right this time?
You said it perfectly.
Oh, thank God. This is probably the first time since we've had you on, and this is fourth time we've had you on now, and I butcher it every time. I'm so sorry. But Fred, you founded MediaTakeOut. You guys have done many, many stories on P. Diddy and his parties and everything over the years. How well do you know him, and how many stories have you actually really done covering him?
Well, we've done probably hundreds, possibly even thousands of stories on Diddy and his family. And we've actually worked with Diddy in the past. So sometimes we've written stories about him. He's reached out personally and commented on stories. Sometimes he's given us pushback on stories. So, I wouldn't say that we have a great relationship with Diddy, but we certainly do have a relationship with Diddy. And so when these allegations came out, when Cassie made the allegations last year, made them publicly, and she made them publicly in a lawsuit, which I think is particularly important that she made it in a lawsuit and not in an interview. When those allegations came out, I think we weren't totally surprised, because I think we'd heard a lot of the murmurs about some of Diddy's behavior in the past, but we were surprised at kind of how specifically she laid out everything, and just the horrific nature of, I think, a lot of the allegations that eventually turned into these federal charges.
Mm-hmm.
So, Fred, dealing with Diddy before all the stories came out with him, the recent stories came out with him, how was he to deal with, like, as a person? Was he cool? Was he a jerk about it? Was he angry? What kind of person was he?
I got to say, like, every interaction that I've had with Diddy has been absolutely professional. He seemed like a nice guy. I mean, he's the Diddy that you kind of see on TV, or you hear on interviews, that's the Diddy that I saw. I didn't see the dark side of it. You hear allegations of violence and stuff like that. That's not what I've seen at all from him. Like I said, I've heard the rumblings, but in terms of kind of personal interaction, I've seen none of that.
So, Fred, obviously, we just want to understand everything going on with Diddy. We want to humanize it. We always say we like to humanize things on the podcast. And people always ask us, how did this all come about? You heard rumblings and rumors over the years about Diddy. We hear that about a lot of celebrities. Was it because he had a lot of accusations from women about his behavior that the feds actually took a deep dive in? Like, how did all the major lawsuits how did it all begin?
So I think it's important to kind of take a look at Diddy's life, right? Like, Diddy has been a celebrity largely for his entire adult life. I mean, he started out at 19 or 20. He was already in the music business. Within a couple of years after that, he was one of the biggest players in the hip hop industry. And the hip hop industry was kind of in its earliest stages at the time of kind of mainstream hip hop. And he was the kind of one of the biggest names behind shepherding hip hop from kind of its, underground roots to becoming mainstream. So when you look at Diddy, he's now 54 years old, and he's been basically a public figure, like a celebrity, for his entire adult life. So when you wrap your head around that a little bit, you start to realize that this is a person that he's never really been normal, right? Like he's been famous and been able to get and do whatever he wanted largely since he was a child. And so whenever you're talking about people like that, there's a lot different about them than us. I think a lot of times, when you hear a story like this, you start thinking about, oh, what would I do, or what would you do? Like, this is a person that was a millionaire, close to a billionaire, for his entire life. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know about, driving a Honda Accord. He doesn't know about living in a house that's not a mansion. He doesn't know about what it's like to go to a club and not be able to go home with all of the different beautiful people that he wants to go home with. So when you have a person that kind of lives their entire adult life in that world, a lot of bad and dark things can happen. And I think, when you look at what you're starting to see, and these allegations aren't just from like a year ago. Some of them are 5 years ago, some of them are from 10 years ago, some of them are even from 20 years ago. You're seeing a history and a pattern of a person that just basically was engaging in risky behavior. If you're going to believe the most kind of Diddy-friendly version of it, it's risky behavior. But if you're going to kind of look at it more objectively, and obviously we saw the tape of what he's done, to a person that was just engaged in the kind of derelict behavior that you would expect from someone that just lived a lifestyle where they could literally have anything and anyone in their life. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Do you think everything that's happening right now is going to ruin his legacy, or this is his legacy? Like, Diddy not known for being a good boy. He's a bad boy. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's his thing. So is this a part of that this makes Diddy more exciting to people, or from here forward, everyone's going to turn their back? Hollywood's going to turn their back on him.
I think Diddy's legacy is absolutely destroyed forever. I think when you think of what Diddy's brand was, he was the party guy. He was the fun guy. He was like, hey, he was with the Ciroc guy. Hey, you wanted to drink the liquor because you kind of felt like you were Diddy at the party, right? Like, that was his entire persona. He was making party music. He was dancing. And, you know, when you think about the allegations, which, you know, obviously they're horrible allegations, but they specifically go to that part of him, right? Like, his parties are what's, you know, at issue, right? Like, his partying is what's at issue. His allegedly feeding victims alcohol and drugs is part of the issue, right? Like, so it's just like everything that he was, everything that his brand, which was at you know, just last year, Forbes valued just his brand at over $1 billion. That very brand is now completely worthless, right? Like, because you cannot say, I'm going to a Diddy party and sell a brand to it, or sell tickets to a Diddy party, right? Like, in fact, if you say you're going to a Diddy party, people will be like, oh my God, you know, it's a horrible thing right now. So it's everything that he was is now completely stripped of him. Obviously, he still has the music. He still has, obviously, investments and the like. So, you know, that value is still there. For now, obviously, he's going to have to pay, he's going to have to pay the victims, whether or not he ends up spending some time in federal prison. I think he's over. I think in terms of his brand, in terms of his legacy, in terms of everything, it's absolutely gone.
Fred, so Diddy tried to pay $50 million to be released from jail on a bond, and the judge said no. We're not. They rejected.
Flight risk.
Yeah, but why would the judge reject it? Obviously, it's a lot of money, but is it because he's a liability? Is it because he's a flight risk? Is it because they think potentially, obviously, he could be, you know, they're leaning towards that he is a guilty person? Why would the judge reject that bond?
So whenever you're at a bail hearing, the question of guilt or innocence is not really up in the bond hearing, right? That'll be determined at trial. So what the judge wasn't looking at whether or not he was guilty or innocent. The judge was looking at a bunch of different factors. One, is he a flight risk? The prosecution was saying, listen, this guy has a private jet at his disposal. This guy is worth, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, possibly billions of dollars. He could fly to Bali or somewhere else and he could never come back. I think the judge looked at that and the judge, I don't know that that completely got the judge convinced that they weren't going to let him go. There was another thing that the judge looked at, which is the possible danger to the community of leaving him out, right? Like, so, okay, he pays the $50 million. Now he's out in the community. And the question is he still going to be doing harm to the community while he's out on bail? And I think at that point, that's when the federal prosecutor showed the Cassie tape, showed exactly what he's been doing to women in his life, showed the kind of brutality that he showed that he exhibited towards Cassie, explained how he lied in the public and said that this never happened and that Cassie was making up all of her allegations, only to be proven, only for them to be, or at least this part of it to be proven true, right? So I think the judge looked at it and he was like, this is a violent man. This is a man that's going to be out there and possibly committing violent acts on when they're out on bail. This is a man that's going to be living in a home in Miami, a gigantic mansion. Presumably he'll be having women over there during the time. And what is he doing to those women when they're there? And I think the judge, after kind of looking at that, she was just not comfortable allowing him to be free, knowing kind of what, like I said, the Cassie video is not an allegation, it's what he in fact did. I think the third piece that got them is that Diddy was actually trying to reach out to potential witnesses on the case and convince them to change, not necessarily change testimony, but to influence their testimony. And the judge found that if Diddy were to be out free, he could be reaching out to potential witnesses on the case and damaging the prosecution's case. So I think when the judge looked at kind of those three factors, like I said, ignoring the fact of whether or not he's guilty or innocent, the judge said that there's just too much evidence, I think, there to let him out.
I always think it's funny how like his fame and wealth and all of that stuff really benefited him his entire life. And this is the one time that it came back to really bite him in the ass, because she goes, no, you're too wealthy. You're too famous. You're too powerful for me to let you go out back into the world, because you could really screw up this entire case. I need to keep you locked up. It's really an interesting kind of turn of events for him, that normally every door opens for him. And this was the time that, nope, this door is staying closed for you.
Remember too, this was going to, if she would have allowed it, this would have been the highest bail in history, right? So he offered the highest bail in history, and the judge still said no, right? So this was the judge basically saying, I don't care about how much money you have.
You can't pay me off.
Your money is no good here.
So I want to, because I want to go down now this route of, he is potentially a dangerous person, right? Like that is kind of what I think some of the allegations are out there is, he could possibly take people out. But it comes back to this Kim Porter book. Have you read the alleged Kim Porter book that is floating around out there?
I did read the Kim Porter book. We got our hands on it and I read it. It's not much of a book. It's more like a pamphlet or a long article that has a ton of incredibly salacious allegations in there. The author, obviously Kim Porter's children and her estate, they reject the book. They say that it wasn't Kim Porter's book. The author of the book, or the person that is publishing the book, is not completely standing behind the allegations in the book. But I can say that there are explosive allegations in there about Diddy.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah,
crazy stuff. But
allegations.
Let me ask you this, Fred.
Go ahead.
You read it. The timeline in the book versus what the timeline we know here with arrests and hospitalizations and this and that and dating, a lot of it lines up. Do you believe the Kim Porter book is real or not?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. I've being in this business as long as I have, I've seen some crazy stories that seemed untrue that turned out to be completely true, and I've seen some stories that look like they're completely true and turn out to be completely false. So I tend to not jump and kind of say what I think, whether I think it's real or not. I just, it's more important to just kind of look at who it is that's publishing it and seeing whether or not it's the kind of thing that, like, if he came to me at MediaTakeOut and said, hey, I have this book or I have these allegations, I ask myself, would I publish it or would we publish it? And I think that we would have significant concerns about the authenticity of it. Like I said, you would, and I think you made a really good point. I think a lot of it lines up completely there. I think a lot of the allegations that are there, while they're explosive and there are names in there like Usher and LB Shore and other people doing all kinds of crazy stuff, you're like, it's shocking to read them, but before you're going to go out there, if this was a book that's just saying these things about Diddy, that's one thing. But when you're bringing other people into it, like Usher, like LB Shore, and plenty of other people that are in it, people who weren't tied to the lawsuit, who women haven't been coming out and saying these things, or anyone else, I just think it's unfair to them to do it. And to Kim Porter too. I mean, this is a lovely woman who's no longer with us. She, by all accounts, was not involved in the stuff that Diddy's saying. But, when you read some of the allegations in there, or some of the stuff that's in there that's supposedly coming from her, it paints her in not a very flattering picture. So, like I said, if this were a book solely about Diddy, I'd be more likely to say, okay, and maybe we'd go with it. But once you're bringing other people into it, I just
people
think it's
that are
unfair.
Yeah, people
that are alive, people
today.
And people that are saying that this isn't true, right? Like I'll be sure saying it isn't true, I'll sure saying it isn't true. I think it's unfair to just say, hey, okay, we believe it, right? Because
if you're someone that wants to hear what's in it, but don't have time to read it, I was listening to a version of someone breaking it down on TikTok. Her name's Amanda Rowland. She has a TikTok page, and she basically went through the whole thing so that I didn't have to read it. It was actually quite interesting, but the allegations in there are so gnarly. Adam, have you heard anything or read anything on this book?
No, there's just I've been really trying to figure out what stories are real and what stories aren't with this, because there's so much stuff going on the internet. I mean, the other day I'm in the line at CVS, and I hear these guys talking about this video of Meek Mill and P. Diddy. And then I'm like, what? And then I'm going down this rabbit hole. Is Meek Mill and P. Diddy did they have some sort of relationship? What is the truth, Fred, with that Meek Mill and Diddy
Well, hold on.
situation?
I want to break down the book real fast, just for people who haven't read it or know what the hell we're talking about right now. But this book is allegedly written by Kim. It's not even, like he said, it's not a book. It's almost just like stuff written on paper to make Diddy and everyone around him look really bad, and that it was almost portrayed as like her dying wish of like, I need to expose the Diddy because I can't do it when I'm alive, essentially. But it alleges threesomes with just about everyone out there, with Mary J. Blige and Will Smith and Jada and all kinds of just crazy stuff, Tupac, and then claims that he had put a hit on Tupac at one point, got him shot up. What else, Fred? There were so many crazy things in there. A fake relationship with J-Lo, that was all just orchestrated for publicity, that he was having conquests with certain younger big musicians in the industry. I don't even want to say it because they are still very much alive and well, and I don't need that kind of heat on me. But that everyone was dying from pneumonia around him, that people that Kim Porter's exes, anyone she would date, would suddenly come down with pneumonia and die. And it all seemed to point back to him, is what this book was alleging. So I don't know. I was listening to the whole thing and my jaw was on the ground. And because my jaw was on the ground, I was like, is this almost too crazy? Like, it's almost too wild. But then I think I've thought a lot of things in Hollywood could be too crazy to be true, and then they end up being true.
Right, and that's I think the point. If we were sitting here, 3 or 4 years ago, and we were talking about Diddy's having freak offs with men involved, and I mean, I think that would sound like a crazy story, right? But it turned out to be in fact true. I mean, obviously his lawyer even admitted that part of it is clearly true. So it's hard, like I said, I don't want to not believe things that are out there right now. But like I said, at the same time, I think that we owe a degree of fairness to people that are not being charged with federal crimes, that haven't been caught on tape beating their girlfriends, that don't have, leagues and leagues and leagues of victims alleging crimes against them. And so, like I said, to the extent that they're writing the stuff about Diddy and the Diddy and Tupac stuff, I think that there's a lot more to that part of the story than what's coming about. Because, before this whole thing, I think there were kind of different spheres of, possible Diddy scandals. There was these types of scandals, right? What's going on in the Diddy parties. I think that those were there. But there were a series of other rumors surrounding Diddy about the violence that was around him,
death and
extreme
destruction
violence
that followed him,
right?
Yeah.
Extreme violence that's around him, and that we're not talking about violence on women. We're talking about just being a real violent person. And so I think that part of the story, I think, is just part of the story I believe has been underreported. I remember when in one of the lawsuits, which was Little Rod's lawsuit, he made all of these allegations, similar allegations to Cassie, about the freak off parties and all the crazy stuff that was happening on there. But he made another series of allegations. One particular allegation that Diddy and his bodyguard actually shot a man outside of a Los Angeles studio, and he provided the name of the man, and he provided details of it, right? Like, and this is a story, and it just kind of like went away, right? Like once we started hearing about baby oil and freak offs, we just kind of forgot about all of that stuff. But that's an entire separate line of investigation that's going on, and I can tell you that that's a line of investigation that's going on currently. The federal prosecutor, the grand jury has not been kind of closed off, right? Like the grand jury is still.
And you're referring to the Tupac one, right?
No. The grand jury.
Oh, this is different because I thought Tupac was shot outside the studio too, and that was what.
No. I'm talking about a separate one, right? Like so, the grand jury, the same grand jury that indicted Diddy, is still impaneled. They're still in New York, and they're still looking at evidence. That's what they invited them now. Every day, they're getting new evidence in. Maybe they took a look at some of the freak off stuff, but there's more. I would expect that there's more indictments that are going to come down against Diddy. And I would also expect that the indictments that are come down against Diddy, the next tier of indictments that come down against Diddy are going to be more in the violence and possibly even include not only the man that Lil Rod alleges was shot outside of Diddy's studio a couple of years ago, but might also actually include Tupac. So I think that's the other shoe to drop in this story, a shoe that I think people are not particularly reporting because they assume, okay, this is the charges against Diddy and that's it. The federal prosecutor was very clear that he expects possibly more charges to be brought. And he was also very clear that the grand jury is still in session, still looking at evidence, and still may offer new indictments against Diddy.
Adam, this Kim Porter alleged book, it claimed that Biggie and Tupac were about to start a record label together, and that Diddy kind of got wind of it and ended up shooting Tupac or having him shot, and then was having Biggie release music to start a feud that didn't exist to make money off of the whole thing. And as it's being explained, I mean, it's literally, supposedly told from Kim Porter, who was there at the restaurant, there at the house, like hearing behind the scenes knowledge of it. That's why like your jaw's on the ground listening to this whole thing or reading it if you're reading it. But that he also apparently, allegedly, I got to keep saying allegedly a lot, so I don't get sued here. But that Biggie, once he had kind of lost Diddy's trust, Diddy didn't protect him anymore, and that's why he ended up getting shot and killed. He was like, Biggie's not going to last 2 days without my protection here, and then boom, he's shot and killed. And that there was a interaction between Diddy and Biggie's mom, and she was basically like, you had him, you let him get killed in front of you, and he made you so much money, and I won't, like, can I have some money? I can't afford my bills. And he's like, no, it's got to go through the lawyers. Like, it's all so wild. This whole story is so wild, and I don't know what to believe anymore. It's so crazy. It's so crazy.
It sounds like Diddy was like the original like Mark Barnum. Like he just started a circus. I mean, it was terrible, but also kind of interesting as far as business wise, because it was so. It was a mastermind. Everything he's done was a mastermind. Is your Dex? Can we get into the baby oil and stuff like that in the Freak Fest?
Yeah, let's get it.
Okay.
Fred, you want to get into the baby oil? Let's do this.
Let's go. Let's baby oil it up.
Let's get into this. Get all oiled up. So the oil, they found tons of baby oil when they made the raid on his house. I'm also hearing rumors that there was sex toys found. There's rumors that there's a bunch of sex toys. Is there any truth to that?
Well, I can say that people say 1,000 bottles of baby oil. Now, the prosecution was clear that it wasn't 1,000 bottles of baby oil. It was 1,000 bottles of baby oil and other lubricants, right? So we're not just talking about baby oil. You're talking about other kind of lubricants involved also. I think it's clear that the baby oil or the lubricants were meant for these freak off parties. This is, it wasn't like he has ashy skin or whatever, and he's like, lotioning up his elbows or whatever. These were tools to be used in the freak offs. That was what the prosecution specifically mentioned. But they did take out tons of other things out of Diddy's home. I would expect that there's sex toys, and there may be even other things out there. That's just what the prosecution has allowed us to get to know now. I think as the trial comes out, we'll get more and more information of all of the different things that they found in Diddy's homes. And
So,
like I said,
Fred,
if you've seen go ahead.
No, sorry, the Freak Fest. Obviously, this was just an orgy, pretty much. Is that what we're to break it all down? It's just an orgy. Everyone's going down, and some stuff's going down in a room. It was just a crazy orgy. Is that what exactly the Freak Fest was?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you see kind of different analogies of kind of the freak off, right? So you have kind of the freak off where it's just like a bunch of people, a bunch of celebrities, and doing all kinds of things in there, right? Like that's the rumored pieces of it, right? Like that's the way that we understand it. That hasn't yet been proven in court. That hasn't yet been alleged by the federal prosecutor. But that has been that's the kind of stories that you hear, and they have been alleged in the different lawsuits, specifically Little Rod's lawsuit. I think he talked about it, an encounter that he had with Diddy and a bunch of other people there. Cooper Gooding Jr. was involved in there. So that's the freak off stories that kind of we hear about. There's the freak offs that Diddy and his legal team have admitted to, right? Like, and they haven't admitted to that first part. What they have admitted to is threesomes and sometimes foursomes involving Diddy, Cassie, and other men involved in it also. So that part of the freak off is Diddy has admitted to it. He's open about it, or him and his legal team are open about it. Diddy and his legal team haven't yet commented on whether or not he was involved in any freak offs, larger type orgies, specifically ones that involve other celebrities possibly, or people where Cassie isn't involved. And that's kind of like a one quiver in the different arrows that Diddy has, right? Like the one thing that he does have is he has a lot of information on other people that were involved in freak offs, possibly other celebrities or other powerful people.
I heard
Fred, I'm sorry. Just to be what you just said. So Diddy's legal team is saying that Diddy was involved with other men.
Yes. Now, what level or how that worked or whatever, they didn't get specifics on it, but they did. They clearly said that there was a relationship where him and Cassie introduced men into their bedroom.
And again, that goes along the lines of what was said in that alleged Kim Porter book. That book says it over and over again that was a very common thing to happen in the house, and that numerous men were invited into the bedroom, and again, big celebrities being named as those men coming into the bedroom, which was wild. Have you heard anything about the rumors or conspiracy theories that some of that alleged baby oil was actually GHB, liquid GHB? Have you heard any of that? And that it acts as when it's on the skin as like a euphoric feeling, so it's like liquid ecstasy. Have you heard anything about that?
I've heard all kinds of rumors on that, and that's in some sense it sort of makes sense. But remember, we do have federal prosecutors who introduce this into evidence, and the federal prosecutors introduced it in evidence not to make Diddy look good. They introduced it to make him look as bad as possible. Mm-hmm. So if I'm sure that the federal prosecutors in fact drug tested it, and they didn't mention that there were any drugs in it, right? So I don't know that we could infer, if the federal government has these things and they tested it and they're not telling us that there was any GHB or any kind of drugs in it, I don't know that we should infer that in there, right? Like maybe they later will tell us that. So I think you should definitely keep an open mind to it. But I don't think that it's safe to assume, at least at this point, that those 1,000 bottles that they found contained any drugs in them.
And then in regards to these tapes that are allegedly out there floating around, because that was also brought up in this Kim Porter thing, is that there's a lot of celebrities that are on tapes and that it was kept as kind of blackmail so that he had power over these people. Do you think those exist with him potentially hooking up with celebrities or them getting filmed, and that it really was, blackmail to be used against them one day?
Yeah, I 100% that those videos exist, and I've heard about those videos. That's the one thing. I mean, like I said, there have always been these stories out there. You hear about these videos of people, and you're like, no, there's no way that a video of that person can exist. And a lot of times, the people that you hear these videos existing are people that were romantically linked to Diddy. And people would tell you, oh, no, I saw it. I saw the video. So these videos do exist. They've been passed around. And I'm sure the feds who raided all of Diddy's homes, they have access to a lot of those videos. I'm sure Diddy and the people around him have access to those videos. And again, like I said, this is another quiver in the arrows, right? Like at this stage, Diddy's in really bad shape. He's sitting in federal prison. He's facing serious charges that could keep him in jail for the rest of his life. Like, what does he have that can possibly get him out? And one of the things that he has is he has information that could be embarrassing to other powerful people. And I think we underestimate how much leverage that in fact could give him in this case. Just not to get too political into kind of how this goes, but remember the Diddy is charged on federal charges. That means that there is a federal prosecutor in New York that's charged him with these crimes. Now that federal prosecutor that has charged him with these crimes was politically appointed by Joe Biden. Now, if the election turns out, if we end up with a Kamala Harris presidency, it's likely that federal prosecutor will remain in their job. However, if Donald Trump wins the presidency, it's almost certain that the prosecutor who is right now in charge of prosecuting Diddy will lose his job and will be replaced by a different prosecutor, and will now take a look at the evidence again anew. And there's no telling whether that new prosecutor feels as kind of strong about prosecuting Diddy as the existing prosecutor does. And like I said, once you start thinking about all of the possible political ramifications, who are in these videos, people start worrying about political careers and stuff like that. Political favors start being passed around. Who knows what could happen? We could literally be sitting here, there may be a change in administration, and all of a sudden this entire thing just kind of disappears and kind of goes off into the sunset. That absolutely would not surprise me. And I think a lot of people don't fully appreciate that that's one of the possible outcomes of this.
Wow, I love how deep this conspiracy theory can go. Oh my God, Fred, you just blew my mind right there. Oh, this is... I've never thought about it in that way. You've got a really powerful man locked up behind bars right now, and he knows a lot of people, and a lot of people are probably very scared of these tapes hitting either mainstream or people even just finding out about the names on the tapes. Because when you've got, especially in this situation where you've got a lot of straight men in Hollywood that are being accused of doing stuff with other men that could potentially ruin their, careers, is what it comes down to, that they're probably freaking out.
Yeah. And these are probably people that are making donations on both sides of the aisle right now. And so who knows where this could lead.
So Fred, I know you guys at MediaTakeOut are working on this. I want to ask you about the story. Is Diddy hiding his money?
Well, I wouldn't say hiding. I think hiding is one of those things that people, he's kind of doing something nefarious about it. But I will say that whenever you're in significant legal peril, like Diddy is in, you begin to take steps to protect yourself. These are all legal steps that your accountant or your financial advisor would advise you to do. And from what we understand, he has been taking these steps. And what the steps are is, in fact, he's a wealthy man. And one of the things that you do when you're wealthy is you want to remain wealthy. Obviously, he's got legal fees he has to pay. He has these gigantic lawsuits that are against him. what can he do to protect his assets and make sure that his assets continue to be in his possession or his family's possession? What we understand, and we spoke to a number of people with inside knowledge, is that Diddy has created significant trusts for all of his children. So he's taken his assets and transferred them to trusts owned by his children. And what that does is, let's say that you have $10 million and you say, well, I have 5 children and I'm going to take $5 million of my assets and I'm going to give each of them $1 million a piece to each of my 5 children. Well, now my assets drop down to $5 million. And in the event that someone were to sue me, you wouldn't be able to get all $10 million of mine, because those assets, while they may still be at least 5 million of them, when they're in the trust, they're still technically under my control because I could still be the executor of the trust. The assets from a legal perspective are no longer mine. And so any creditor wouldn't be able to come after those assets. So whenever you're facing kind of financial ruin or imminent financial ruin, one of the first things that you do is you try and transfer as much of your assets out of your possession and into the possession of your children. From what we understand, that's precisely what he's done. So that's one step that I know that Diddy has made. Another step that his attorney specifically said that he did is that he sold a lot of his assets. So he sold stock and other assets, and he used the proceeds of that assets to pay down his mortgage on his Florida mansion. Now, what the lawyer explained why he did that is he said, well, now look, we have this Florida mansion. It's worth $50 million. And as a $50 million asset, it can be used for bail, right? Like it's a great asset for bail. And that's true. But there's another benefit of doing that I think a lot of people didn't truly pick up on, is that in Florida is one of the few states that your home, your private primary residence, cannot be attached in bankruptcy or by any of your creditors. So if you have a home in Florida and you file for bankruptcy, your creditors can never touch your home. And that doesn't matter if your home is a $2 million home. It doesn't matter if your home is a $200,000 home, or in the case of Diddy, your home is a $50 million home. Now, why would you pay down the assets? Well, you pay down the mortgage because if let's say you have a $10 million mortgage on your home and you have $10 million in stock. Well, the $10 million in stock, they can come after. Mm-hmm. But if you sell the stock and you transfer the $10 million in stock and you use it to pay down your mortgage, well, now your home just becomes a giant piggy bank to store as much assets as you can. And in the event that you were to file for bankruptcy, what you would do is you would just keep the mortgage, keep the assets in your home. And then after the bankruptcy was over, whether that was 7 years or whatever, you can then take out a mortgage on those assets out of the home. So let's say Diddy waits 8 years, the home's still worth $50 million. He could then take out a $40 million mortgage on the home and have $40 million of cash. So it's a way of kind of legally, and this is none of the stuff that I'm saying right now is illegal, improper, or anything. This is just kind of like shrewd advice, shrewd financial advice. And that's precisely what Diddy's doing. And when you start seeing someone making these moves, I think it's important to know that, there are a lot of victims out there and they're going after Diddy and they're expecting, some of them are expecting to be compensated, as they should. But I think we have to be very, very careful about what is coming up. And typically, when you see these types of moves being made, and you have these gigantic lawsuits that are out there, what the next step in kind of the process in this is a bankruptcy filing, where you file for bankruptcy protection to stop all of your potential creditors from coming at you. From what we understand, that's precisely the road that Diddy is taking. So he's already taken the assets and kind of placed them in trust for his children and his mom. He's then sold as much as he could and used it to kind of like use his Florida home as a piggy bank. And kind of the third step in that is to file for bankruptcy. And that essentially stops anyone from getting any of his money kind of going forward.
It's really fascinating to hear how someone can, if they know what they're doing or they have the right team around them, use the laws in their favor and just kind of transfer assets. Adam and I are not rich enough to know anything about that, so we have nothing to transfer around. But
terrible.
How is Diddy being treated in jail? Is he being given special treatment, or is he kind of locked up with everyone else at this point?
From what we understand, he's in administrative segregation, so he's in a cell by himself. I know there were reports out there that him and the guy from FTX were celebs or something like that. I don't believe that's true. Diddy is in a cell by himself where he stays for 23 hours of the day. He has 1 hour of kind of when he's allowed to walk out in a kind of segregated space where he's alone largely. And while he's in the in his cell, he's allowed to read books. And from what we've been told, the book that he's been relying on the most has been the Bible. So he's been reading. He's been sitting in a cell by himself, 23 hours a day, reading the Bible, and then 1 hour every day he kind of walks around a yard, which is maybe 20 by 10. Paces back and forth for an hour, and then goes back, reads his Bible. All of his meals are given to him inside of the cell, and that's basically his life, or it has been for the last 2 weeks now.
Jeez.
So, Fred, I wanted to ask, because like I was saying before, I was in line at CVS, and I hear these people talking about the Meek Mill and P. Diddy video, audio. Is there any truth to that, or is that just all AI?
Wait,
that video.
I don't know what that is. Can you fill me in?
So there is a video that's circulating around that purportedly shows Meek Mill and Diddy in some kind of a romantic, kind of groan-filled embrace, let's say.
Okay.
But we looked into that. I mean, obviously, as soon as we saw that, we were like, "Well, what is this?" We want to kind of authenticate it. That video that that has been seen and everyone's been passing around is absolutely not Diddy and Meek Mill. There's a separate video that's going around that says that someone had audio of the two of them engaged in some kind of a romantic encounter. Another, like I said, groan-filled romantic encounter. We looked into that too. That video was not a video of Meek Mill or Diddy or any. It was taken from an adult video. It's completely separate. And this is just people online that just kind of made this up. And at least those two videos were completely made up and said that it was Diddy and Meek Mill involved in it. That certainly wasn't the case. I guess the bigger question is, what's the nature of the relationship between Meek Mill and Diddy? And like I said, I think it's at this stage, it's unfair to assume from Meek Mill's standpoint anything, right? Like there has been no women coming out and saying this. Cassie never said that Meek Mill was involved in any of this. His name didn't largely show up in any lawsuit with these kind of allegations. These are just kind of like Twitter rumors or kind of social media rumblings that you hear. We hear them too. We've looked into them in the past, and we found no evidence that the two men were engaged in anything like that. We found no evidence that Meek Mill has ever engaged in any of that stuff. Like I said, Diddy has admitted to being in relationships with Cassie and other men. Meek Mill has never admitted to that. We have never found any credible evidence that Meek Mill is engaged in anything like that. And so I don't think that there's anything to it with Meek Mill. That being said, the two men did have a close relationship. And we do know about these freak-offs that Diddy was frequently having. There is an open question of whether or not Meek Mill did participate in any of these freak-offs. If he did, to what extent? And then I guess by proxy, who were the partners? Were they male or female, if that matters to anyone?
It's crazy how many celebs are getting dragged into this Diddy stuff. And I would say mostly because of the white parties, obviously. And I think there's a big distinction between celebs showing up to his white party that was highly publicized, a promotional event, something that cameras were really allowed into, and then his freak offs. Would you agree with that, Fred? Like, there's certain parties that I think were more of the public facing. You get the bigger celebs there, everyone's there. I don't know if those ones necessarily turned into freak offs, but they were more like cameras were walking around. The celebs aren't going to start ripping off their clothes at necessarily the white party. I think the freak offs were more of weekend activities. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think the people that kind of are assuming that the freak offs happened. I mean, obviously there's a party and there's celebrities and there's, other, like you or I might be at that party too, right? But then at some point the party's over, people like you and I go home, and the celebrities typically stay, right? Like maybe they stay a little bit longer, they have a deeper relationship with Diddy. And the question then becomes, do these white parties start off kind of innocuous and eventually end up being a freak off? And so I think that's the bigger question that's out there. And the other thing, and it's something that I hadn't mentioned, is that this was alleged in multiple lawsuits, and the federal prosecutors, while they didn't specifically say it, they alluded to it, is that Diddy's homes both are incredibly videotaped. So there are videotape at just about every square foot that you're in those homes is videotaped. So if there are parties that are going on there, if there are parties that maybe you're in a party and maybe you think you're in a private area of the home, and maybe you think that you're, engaging in a private activity with someone, it's very likely that that entire encounter was captured on video. So the videos that I say, I mean, when we talk about these freak offs, we have this concept of, oh, there are a bunch of people and they're just kind of like all in this gigantic mound of flesh, and one of the people are on top of each other. And, that, like I said, that very well could have happened. But what could have also happened is that Diddy invited a bunch of celebrity men and females and women to his home. And then at some point during the evening, maybe two people may have kind of moved off into a secluded area of the house. This is a gigantic home, and maybe thought that they were having a private, intimate encounter. That's not necessarily thinking, hey, I'm involved in this kind of freak off party, but just this idea of kind of this free love kind of environment that Diddy was providing allowed me to kind of think, hey, it's a safe place for me to go and have a romantic encounter with this person. Maybe you're a celebrity, and maybe it's a person that's not your partner or your spouse, and it's completely captured on video in Diddy's home. And now Diddy has those videos, right? So the freak off nature, and so when I say that a lot of people are just not coming forward, it's not because they think, oh, I was invited in this freak off where, me and 19 women were on top of each other thing. They might literally not remember, right? Like Diddy's been doing this now for 30 years, right? So the question now comes into your mind, 25 years ago, when I was drunk in Diddy's home and maybe, whatever happened, like, is that still on a videotape? Is that going to be played for federal prosecutors? And when you think about the number of people that have come in and out of Diddy's life over those past 30 years, I mean, if you don't just go online and just search the name Diddy and whoever the powerful person that you think, just write down Diddy and that person's name and see, they'll show up, right? Like, was that person ever at Diddy's home? Were they ever at a party? Did they ever maybe get too drunk and maybe do something that they didn't think was right? And is that on a videotape? And is that in Diddy's possession? Like I said, when you think about kind of the ramifications of this and what Diddy has, like I said, the leverage that he has over these powerful people, I wouldn't be surprised, and I think it's going to be one of those things that is really, really shocking to people, if this entire thing, at least the prosecution piece of it, just completely disappears. And I think it's something that I think a lot of people, there'll be legal experts that'll talk about, oh yeah, but this wasn't, there was something about the indictment that wasn't right. They'll give you all kinds of excuses. But like I said, it's all going to come down to this. At the end of the day, we know for a fact that there are people, powerful people, that are on those videotapes. not necessarily involved in the freak off. I'm not saying that they were involved in that, but they were in Diddy's home doing something that they don't want to do. And they're on tape, and Diddy's got them on tape. We know that. That's fact. And the question is, what is Diddy going to do with that? And how is he going to, and his team going to use to manage that into getting him out of the mess that he's in right now?
And the Kardashians hung out with Diddy a whole lot. Let me just put that out there. And they are some of the most powerful people, most well-connected people on the planet. Oh, Fred, I could talk to you for hours. This is such a fascinating conversation. This Diddy stuff has really taken over the entertainment industry. We do our Raw rundowns on Friday where we do the top 10 entertainment stories of the week. And consistently, Diddy has been the number one story every single week for the last 5 weeks, just because every day there's something new that is coming forward that's coming up about him. I want to say thank you for taking the time. I know you're a very busy man. You're the CEO. You're the founder of MediaTakeOut. You've got lots going on your plate. So I really appreciate you sitting down, coming back on the Hollywood Raw podcast, chatting with us and kind of getting us up to speed with your knowledge on Diddy and kind of the whole thing that's happening with him right now. So thank you for spreading your knowledge with us today.
Thanks, guys. I always have fun being here.
Thanks,
and
Fred.
We will probably have you back because God knows Diddy stuff is not going away anytime soon.
No, it isn't.
All right. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you, Fred. Very good conversation. I feel like I know everything what's going on with P. Diddy. I also have my own perspectives and opinions on it, which I'll save it because, again, I'm curious how this all plays out in court. He did just hire a new legal team. We'll see how these new power lawyers come in and if they have a really good story to get him off of this case. Again, he's only
you don't want to get Diddy off. Don't get Diddy off. Is what we're saying.
You do not want to get Diddy off. You'll have to you'll go back and forth to Walgreens and CVS or Dwayne Reed, and just get as much oil as you can. Fred's a really good guy. And Fred's a lawyer too, so Fred knows. The legal aspects of this case.
The ins and outs. Yeah.
But thank you guys for watching. For watching on Red Coral Universe. Thank you for watching. For watching on YouTube. Leave a review. Leave a comment. Helps us out in that algorithm. Leave us a review on our podcast, wherever you listen to the podcast, because it helps out in that algorithm. There's all these different algorithms. We're all trying to hack the algorithm. Check us out, our private Facebook group called Off the Record. It's a fun group. You can ask us questions. We talk to you. You talk to us. It's a fun community. Follow me at Adam Glyn. Follow Dax Holt at Dax Holt. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye. What's up, guys? If you like that video, there's plenty more where that came from.
Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell so we can just feed you all the goodness daily.
Hurry up. Come on, let's go.